Hello everybody and welcome back to the Pregnancy and Postnatal Entrepreneurs Collective podcast. I am joined today by Kristin Revere, who is the founder and owner of Gold Coast Doulas, a West Michigan-based birth and postpartum doula agency. With years of experience, Kristin is passionate about supporting families through pregnancy, childbirth and early parenthood. She's also a certified speaker and advocate, having presented at many conferences such as DoulaCon and the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. Additionally, Kristin has co-authored the book Supported Your Guide to Birth and Baby, and through her doula agency, she offers comprehensive in-person and virtual services empowering families worldwide. So welcome, Kristin. Thank you very much for joining me today. So firstly, just to kind of get us started and get people to know you a little bit better, what brought you into doula work and how long have you been doing it?
Hi, Neith. Thank you. So I started getting into this work, as many birth workers do, based on my own experiences. So I had a lot of positive experience, hired doulas with my second birth, and really wanted to make an impact as a childbirth educator. And then that hobby turned into a career once my students asked me to be their doula. So I decided to go to Florida and get trained and take a client or two a year. And I fell in love with being with women in this vulnerable time of pregnancy, childbirth, and the postnatal phase.
And when you first ventured into childbirth education, did you have like a different job, a different career before that?
So my background is in political fundraising. That is what I was working in a governor's race when I was pregnant with my daughter, and had done some work in communications and public relations, advertising, sales. So I came from a much different background than birth work and never really imagined my life to go in that direction, but felt really passionate about women's health and supporting women and families during this time of many transitions.
Brilliant. And you've built a really successful doula agency, and you've written your book, and a lot of people struggle really with the kind of getting started with their business and making it profitable and being able to look after themselves and their family. So you went from kind of like a corporate type career to taking this full time, but what happened in the middle?
So in the middle, I would say, I started out in a collective. So really got my feet wet and didn't find that my personality was attracting the clients, the collective was. And so again, coming from that corporate and political background, I was not the typical doula at the time who was more crunchy and like home birth focused. And so I decided to start my own private practice and went on my own and was able to, set my own branding and marketing and use some of my experience from my careers and be able to build my own business. But then I wanted to make even more impact because as a birth doula, I could only take a couple clients a month without risk of two going at the same time, and wanted to be able to have a one-stop shop to be able to support families in a non-medical way from conception through the first year. And so when I launched Gold Coast in 2015, I had a partner. She was a former labor and delivery nurse and a hypnobirthing educator. And we decided to share calls so we could take more birth clients, and brought a postpartum doula training to our area, and then hired many of the doulas who were in that training program, because at the time there were not many certified postpartum doulas. If there were in our area, they only did short daytime shifts and were focused more on household tasks and recovery. And we wanted to help families get rest. And so our doulas were trained in infant care, and we launched the first doula agency in our area, but also focusing on overnight newborn care. And that took a lot of education because, as I mentioned, like postpartum doulas were not something that people thought of when they were looking for care after having a baby. They might go for a nanny or a mother's helper or different types of support, an au pair. But we ended up educating pediatricians and spoke wherever we could in the community about the role of a postpartum doula and started Ask the Doulas. My original partner had moved away due to her husband's job. And so I brought on a new partner, and she's a sleep consultant and a postpartum doula. And Alyssa and I started Ask the Doulas together, the podcast, in 2017 as a way to further educate on not only the role of a postpartum doula, but of all of the professionals in the birth and baby space. And at the time we started the podcast, our interviews were in person. So we'd bring in a car seat safety technician, a pediatric dentist, and would be able to not only educate our clients, but further relationships with those important professionals working in the space.
Absolutely. Networking is one of my favorite tips to give people. And there is so much in that part of the story that you've told us already that I want to get more from you. So I'll go back as far as I can, in particular where you said about how you felt that your personality didn't match with the collective of doulas that you had joined. And then in taking that really brave move to then go out on your own to do that. Because I imagine for a lot of people, if they felt that they didn't fit into an industry, that they might just figure it wasn't for them and, go back to doing the job they were doing or try something else. So what was it that was in you that gave you the bravery or the ability or the resilience to go out on your own that way?
Well, I feel that there is a doula for everyone. And that at this stage, we are so needed in the hospital space. I love attending home births, but I found that having gone through a preeclampsia, having a NICU daughter, an induction with my first, and, having to change providers to get the support I needed and advocate for myself, that really the support of a birth and postpartum doula can be for anyone, regardless of parenting style, feeding choices, and where they choose to deliver and who they choose as their provider. A doula is there as judgment-free support. And also, of course, we talk about safe sleep and other safety methods related to feeding and car seats and, some education, but we are not there for one particular method.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important point, and one that's worth kind of going over a bit, is that there is a doula for everyone. And, some of your clients, I'm sure, wouldn't have been attracted to some of the doulas from your previous collective because they might have a different type of personality type that would be more in line with yours.
Exactly. And so, of course, it's all about knowing who's in your community. And I will, if I'm not the perfect doula and if my agency doesn't have the perfect doula, then I know other doulas to refer and related practitioners. So midwives and OBs and all of the different support team members.
So you talked as well about how when you were birth doulaing, it became quite obvious that you can't do it all on your own, as you can't help as many people that you wanted to help. So you brought in someone into a partnership and you worked on call together. How long did that go on for before you decided to take in more?
So yes. So my original birth partner and we shared call for a couple of years until she moved. And I have doulas on my team who still prefer to work in that partner method. So there'll be 2 doulas working with a family. 1 doula attends the birth, but I also have birth doulas on my team who choose to work in a solo basis. So there again is a doula or team approach for everyone based on their needs. And with the day and overnight postpartum doula team members at Gold Coast, we have some families that want 1 doula and, whether that's daytime or overnight care. and others that are comfortable, especially if they want a lot of support, with having 10 of our doulas in and out of their home if they want both daytime and overnight, and say they have twins or triplets, then they're comfortable with our approach and the way our team communicates and the way that I, hire the subcontractors that work for me, the background checks and the fact that they're all certified and have, liability insurance, for example, makes them feel comfortable, because it's an intimate experience to hire, whether it's a birth doula or a postpartum doula, and to trust someone in your home when you're sleeping is certainly something that is, I take very seriously, is, the work I do into assembling our team.
And I think that's something that people, it's not that they don't consider, but maybe they just don't think about it enough. And I've definitely had conversations about this with some of my coaching clients around how we're asking people to invite us into a very, very special space in their lives, whether that's their birth room or with their new little baby, or as you said, if they're asleep, like that's a very intimate space. And it's really important that the clients get something from us, as in they understand that trust part that you're talking about around sort of liability insurance, and that people are trained properly, and also that they get to know the person a little bit and have an understanding of who they are as a human being before they invite them into that space.
100%. So it's not only a match in background and training, but also personality. Even if you're sleeping and not really interacting with that doula, to know that you get along and that you trust them and you can ask them questions and get resources, whether it's a mental health therapist, a physical therapist, and be able to, interview them is important before working with them.
Absolutely. And, I imagine setting up an agency, there's a lot of practicalities involved in that. So around legal and documents and systems and contracts. So what was it like going through that process of getting it set up?
Yes. So as someone who had worked in business and marketing, I was excited about creating the brand for the agency, but wanted things to be perfect. And we did a publicity campaign where we went to every city that we serve, because we're up and down Lake Michigan, and had a tour. And so I wanted the website to be perfect. Our photography, I wanted a big enough team at the launch to create a splash. But that was 6 months of behind the scenes, no one really knowing what was up other than some clients, because my former business partner and I, we were operating solo businesses. So as individual clients were hiring us, we talked about that model and started sharing call and trialing it. So we had that going for us, but I would have launched earlier in hindsight and not been perfect, rather than waiting 6 months for the big splashy release of, this is the day the website's live, we're, hitting the first city. And we did get a lot of media from it, but sometimes it's good to start scrappy and not be perfect.
That's what I was going to ask you. You've answered it. What would you have done differently? And done is better than perfect is something that we say all the time. Get it out there, start, and then you can see where it comes from that. Is there any other kind of things you would change, or even the positives of how you did things?
Yeah. So other than, starting sooner, I think that the focus back then was so much of the referrals. And I would have spent a bit more on paid advertising than creating. We did all of, the business cards and put rat cards out in all of the places, baby stores, bookstores, places that would take our materials. But I would have invested earlier in paid search or paid ads rather than focusing more on print materials.
Now, at this stage in your business, what do you think about print materials? Is it something you use at all or not at all?
I still use them. So we still have flyers and rat cards and business cards. I don't print the quantity I used to. And in fact, when I launched Gold Coast, we would have a welcome packet that I would personally mail out to every inquiry with a letter and all of our flyers and my business card. And so that was time consuming and expensive, but it was also a way to separate ourselves from our competitors. So now we have a virtual welcome packet with that same information that gets emailed out to all of our potential clients. And so that certainly, is more affordable, but is also better for the environment to avoid, printing. And so, yeah, I would say it's still important if you're doing expos or in-person events, or if you are doing giveaways like swag bags in classes or presentations, it's good to still have printed materials, but it depends on the focus of your business, who you're reaching, where you are geographically. And I still have flyers in baby stores and places. So it's a mix, but certainly so much more has gone online, and social media is bigger than it was when I launched Gold Coast Doulas.
And in this journey that you've had, what would you say has been the biggest challenges and maybe how you overcame them?
Certainly the pandemic and navigating that, pivoting to virtual services from in person, and, still being able to keep our office space and afford that when things changed. I was fortunate as a birth doula to be in a state where doulas were considered essential workers by our governor. So we had about a week where we were not able to work in hospitals and stayed home. But then I was back at work and was able to work with clients. But the postpartum end of our business ended up suffering because, of course, people were not comfortable having doulas in their home. And, in this time of, the pandemic and COVID, our postpartum clients were not comfortable having doulas in their home during that time when COVID was spreading. And so that end of the business suffered, and we were able to write some grants to keep our office space open and pivoted our in-person classes to virtual pretty quickly, and luckily had virtual sleep consulting already set up. So it moved a lot of our focus to those areas. But our clients were telling us that they were overwhelmed and anxious and wanted a community. So we created our Becoming a Mother course during the early pandemic and spent time polling not only our clients and students on what they needed support-wise, what was making them fearful, but also in moms groups all over the country. And so we had focus style groups and created our course based on that need. I don't think I would have had the time or focus to devote to a course if life hadn't turned the way it did. And that course then led to our book, Supported Your Guide to Birth and Baby. So all of the modules in the course are chapters in the book.
Fabulous. And did you write the book during the pandemic as well?
So we wrote the course and the workbook during the pandemic. And I had an idea for a book when I had my solo practice. So many years before I started Gold Coast. So I had client stories pre-approved, had a lactation consultant and pediatrician. So a lot of a mental health therapist. So a lot of the contributors to the book were part of a completely different book idea that never came to fruition. And I'm so thankful that I held off, because I feel like this guide to birth and baby speaks to a larger group than my original concept would have.
And how did you find the whole process of putting together the book, getting it published?
It was not at all the glamorous version of the world as an author that I imagined. And part of it is I did not hire an agent. So I wrote proposals and shopped the book out to publishers on my own and found a small press publisher that focuses mainly on breastfeeding and educational books. And so they really resonated with our concept. And I knew that not going with one of the big 5 publishers and making the choice to go small would mean I didn't have a PR team behind me. But the support that I received from our publisher and the fact that they are so niche focused helped. And I didn't want to hybrid publish or self-publish. That was not a goal. I did want a publisher. And so that process and the whole launch, which again, like having a PR background, I loved, the media part of it and the release date, which was Mother's Day last year. So we had a nice hook, but I didn't realize how much work goes into the pre-launch and trying to create excitement, and how much work even after. Like, it'll be a year in May that the book has been out and I'm still promoting it.
There's so much involved in that promotion, and in getting book launches out. Did you feel that you took on more than you anticipated, or did that excitement carry you through?
So I, having been a journalism major in school, had always wanted to be a published author. So that part was great, having a co-author who specializes in things that I do not. So Alyssa being a sleep consultant and being able to write that chapter. I'm a birth doula. She's not. We're both postpartum doulas and newborn care specialists. So having someone with a different perspective, but also having our voices, blend well together in a book was also, a challenge for our editors. Mm-hmm. And we ended up recording the audio version ourselves. So we did not hire experts to do it. So that process of recording the book was a little bit different than I imagined. It's so much work. I give voice actors a lot of credit. Long days.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine, even recording the podcast takes so much effort and editing. So I can't imagine what it's like to record and edit a whole book.
Yeah, but you're speaking, to professionals in the space. So my advice is a book can create authority and interest and expand geographically the way a doula agency like my own does not enable me to. And having a podcast like yours, again, just increases your visibility and your ways of connecting. So considering what makes you passionate, is it blogging? If you're not one to take the time and, financial cost of having a podcast or, writing a book, maybe there are other ways that you can increase your authority.
Absolutely. And I do think you're right there in people finding their own way of what suits them, whether if it's someone who likes talking, they might do a podcast or a YouTube channel. If it's someone who prefers writing, they might do the blog or the book. But it is really important that people do something.
Yes.
And I find that a lot of kind of birth workers, obviously we come into this work because we're passionate about helping families and about the care of newborns and the support that people really, really need. And that most of us don't come from a business background or have any kind of PR sort of behind us. So we either have to learn as we go along or we don't. And then the business doesn't evolve. So from your own experience in your previous work and in everything that you've learned over the last 12 years, what are some of the tips that you would give people who are maybe either starting out or who have been plugging away for a while, they're really not getting the momentum and seeing as many clients as they'd like to?
Hire experts, whether it's a social media manager, an accountant, a bookkeeper. look at your time being valuable. And I still am in the thick of it. I still teach and work with clients. I've greatly reduced my client load, but I'm still doing some $25 an hour tasks that I could hire out. But the majority of my time is spent in the visionary owner seat. And so I am doing the job role that I love most, which is interacting with clients, the doulas on my team. And so I'm not doing every single social media post. I have an editor for my podcast and different virtual assistants and a marketing VA that helps me create my marketing plan and execute the vision, because our time is limited. So think about those tasks that you could hire out, whether you have a part-time employee or you hire virtual assistants or a marketing or SEO firm, for example. I am all about bringing on experts that can help you grow further than you can on your own.
And how long were you in business before you got somebody in to help with those type of things?
You know, I would say as far as the larger role for virtual assistants, that has only been about 3 years in the business. But I did hire a website content creator, and I hired firms to design some of our materials and an SEO agency right away. So, and have always had an accountant and bookkeeper. So those things have been with me from the start, is investing in other experts, but having a team member that is there. Like I have a scheduler for our postpartum doula shifts, and that's been several years as well. So that is key to giving me more time to grow the business, because scheduling can take so much time.
Absolutely. And I think, you mentioned around the kind of value in your time and the tasks that we do. And for most of the people who are listening, the work they want to do is the client work. You know what I mean? They want to be with woman or with mom and baby. And that's where most people will feel their value is. But yet when they're solo entrepreneurs, they also have to be, the marketing also has to be done, the website has to be done, the social media has to be done, the books have to be done. So it is really valuable to get people in to support you with those things, so you can do the work that you want to do and that you're best at.
100%. So otherwise, you end up getting burned out if you're doing everything. I know it seems like it's saving you money, but it does pay off to hire experts.
Yeah, and
they're more efficient.
Yes, absolutely. If someone can get it done faster than you can, then it's definitely an investment worth exploring, because the time it might take me 8 hours to do, but an expert might get it done in 2, and then I only have to pay for 2 hours of their time rather than 8 hours of my time.
Exactly.
And in hiring, say, people who worked more closely in the business, like, so maybe the VA who were given kind of responsibility for tasks that you were doing yourself, how did you find that process, or was there anything that you learned along the way?
Certainly, whether it's an employee or a virtual assistant, making sure that you're on the same page and there's accountability and trust there. I like to, again, hire experts and trust them and their processes and go to them for advice, because they know all the trends, whether it's social media or SEO or, the laws regarding accounting in particular states. And so, yeah, I rely on them, but also they need to know my bigger picture and vision and their role that they're playing within the big picture and what my expectations are. And if it's not working out, then, it's time to move on.
Absolutely. And we've talked kind of around your journey and some of the practical business end of things. And we touched a little bit on mindset, but maybe we could go there a little bit more around working for yourself or being a business owner requires a lot of resilience and different kind of either mindsets or mental abilities to keep going. Have you any kind of thoughts on that or tips for people who might be struggling in that area?
Certainly find other entrepreneurs, whether it's in your industry. And I mean, some of your cohorts, you are creating that connection and support for each other. And so I would say find other people. Your friends who work in corporate America or who work in healthcare may not be interested in your struggles as an entrepreneur, but entrepreneurs light each other up. We have this passion and fire and experience that is quite unique in that we wear so many hats. And we take a lot more risk than someone who goes to a job every day and has a salary and has benefits.
I think it's important as well where you said it doesn't have to be necessarily people in the industry, just other entrepreneurs. I go to a lot of networking events and hardly anybody who has anything to do with birth or babies, but being around other people having the same struggles, having the same highs, having the same lows, and seeing what other people are doing and just getting that support is just hugely beneficial.
It is, absolutely.
So, Kristin, thank you very much. Is there anything else that you feel could be helpful for people in building their businesses and in being in this space?
Certainly having quarterly reviews in your business. My business happens to run on EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is based on the book Traction by Gino Wickman. So I have a facilitator annually who helps me create the vision for the business. And then quarterly, I meet with my team and we set goals and figure out what is important in that 90-day window that we need to achieve to then look at what our 1-year goal is for growth, what the 3, 5, 10-year. So it's not only important to do annual planning, but to think about quarterly planning and visioning for your business. And again, you can look at budgets and all messaging, all of the things. But I find that I do better working in smaller windows than saying, I want to hit $5 million in 2 years, for example.
Absolutely. I think breaking it down can feel in one way much more achievable, but also it keeps the focus. Whereas if we only do long-term goals with nothing in between, it's easy to even forget that we thought about it.
Exactly.
Well, listen, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been absolutely lovely talking to you and getting to know you better. And for everyone listening, thank you for joining us, and we will be back with you next week. Bye.
Bye, Neve. Thank you.